Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is David Huberman. I'm with ICANN. I'm with ICANN's Office of the Chief Technology Officer. Good morning, and thank you to the C8 Program Committee for allowing me the privilege of talking this morning. Today I'm going to talk about the root server system, and we are going to start with some history that not a lot of people know, but how the root server system got to where it is today. We'll talk about some of the root servers that exist here in the Southeast Europe service region, a little bit about governance and the distribution of the root. So, in 1983, Paul Makapetris published RFC 882, which defined the DNS protocol. In 1984, the first root server was established. And a root server was what Paul Makapetris envisioned was a server that would function at the root of the DNS tree. The first root server was established where Paul was, which was at the University of Southern California's Information Sciences Institute, which I'm going to call in this presentation ISI. In 1985, there were 4 root servers, and two of them were on the United States West Coast at ISI, and 2 of them were in the United States East Coast. One at a government contractor called SRI in suburban Virginia, and another at the Army Research Laboratory in Aberdeen, Maryland. By 1987, there were 7 root servers, and you'll see, if you look at this list and you recognize these acronyms, they were all in the United States. There was no geographic diversity in 1987 for the root server system. By 1991, that was rectified. By 1991, the Nordic University Network in Sweden took over for the United States Air Force for one of the root servers. NordUnet was chosen because it had a long history of good DNS operations, having operated the .se TLD for the country, and it was also the world's first international wide area multi-protocol network. TCP/IP, X25, DECnet, NJE, they were running it all. A great organization to run a root server. So until the beginning of 1993, all of the data was housed inside the United States Department of Defense, in a Department of Defense NIC, the Network Information Center. So in the beginning of 1993, John Postel and Mark Costers transferred all of the non-military data out of the DoD NIC and into the InterNIC, which we now know as VeriSign. InterNIC took over the running of what is now A-Root. And in the summer of 1993, Paul Vixie approached John Postel, and he expressed his interest in running a root server based on all the work he had done on Bind. John Postel, of course, said yes. ISC was added, and in 1993, we now had 9 root servers. So when a DNS resolver boots up, it has to initialize its cache with a priming query. The priming response that the resolver receives includes both a current NS resource record set and the IP address information needed to reach the root servers. But in 1985 in their state, the root server names were not standardized, and the response to the priming query was maxed out in terms of the number of bytes that could fit into the packet. So to fix that, Paul Vixie, Bill Manning, and Mark Costers applied label compression to the root servers. Mark Costers came up with the rootservers.net name, and he assigned these labels, A, B, C, and D, and so forth, to each of the root server operators. With label compression applied, there was now room in the response packet for 4 more root servers. And in 1997, we reached where we are today, 13 root servers. There are 13 labels in the root server system, a.rootservers.net through m.rootservers.net. For each, there is one IPv4 address and one IPv6 address. And these 13 root servers are operated by 12 root server operators. VeriSign operates 2 of them. The root servers and the root labels are actually assigned to 900 different instances around the world. But it's not 900 root servers. There's actually quite a lot of servers within an instance. So it's actually quite a few thousand root servers distributed around the world. When I first started thinking about this presentation in the late fall, I asked myself, I wonder how much traffic a root server gets today, or the root system gets today, actually. So I went and looked. And the reason I was able to look is because something called the Root Server System Advisory Committee, the RSSAC. This is an advisory committee organized in ICANN, but what it really is the root server operators, the 12 root server operators, coordinating the root server system together. And one of the things they did is they published a document, RSSAC02, which was parameters, measurements of the root server system. These were a group of parameters that they all agreed would be really good to publish, and they do so publicly. So you can go to any of the root server operators, and you can look at their FTP site, and sure enough, there are their daily statistics about root service. So on the 1st of December of last year, I looked, and for 12 of the 13 root servers in total, there were 77.7 billion queries being received. And this is what it looks like. There was one root server that wasn't reporting statistics at that time. As you can see from this graph, the vast majority of traffic that goes to the root server system is over UDP and over IPv4. But the good news technologies like DNS over TLS and DNS over HTTPS, I'm certainly expecting these numbers to increase. So these are the root server operators. VeriSign runs A, ISI still runs B, Cogent, an internet service provider in Washington, D.C., runs C, the University of Maryland runs D root, NASA at a facility in California runs E root, ISC, Paul Vixie's creation, now run by Jeff Osborne, runs F. The United States Department of Defense, the military, still runs 2 root servers, G and H. And our friends in Sweden, NetNode, still run iRoot. So when label compression was applied and we moved to 13 root servers, we had 4 spaces, J, K, L, and M. Classifying it as an experiment to the other root server operators, John Postel and Mark Costers assigned J and K to Network Solutions, which was running the internet, and L and M were at ISI. And the plan was when a new root server operator would come along, is they would assign each of these letters out to the new root server operator. So the first to come along was our friends at RIPE. And RIPE was assigned K, which came from J and K, which were at Network Solutions. The next to come along was WIDE in Japan. And John Postel said to Mark Costers, oh, I know, WIDE is getting a root server, so let's give them J for Japan. And Mark went, no, it's not for Japan, it's for all of Asia. So, oh, and by the way, I've already given one of my root servers, and you still have 2 more, so why don't you give one of yours? So, you know, M works really well for June Marai, so here you go. You take M. So M went to WIDE, K went to RIPE. Then there was L. L's an interesting story, because ISI was running B and L, and they were running it in the same LAN. B was in Iraq. L was on the floor. So officially, L went to ICANN as part of ISI support of ICANN's creation. Unofficially, L was on the floor. That was probably not a good idea. So John Crane from ICANN picked the server up, put it into a rack in an ICANN data center, renumbered it into ICANN address space, and look, L is now at ICANN. So there are root server instances all throughout the world. but here we are today in Sarajevo, and I wanted to talk about some root server instances here in the Southeast Europe service region. By the way, it's very difficult to get a definition of what the Southeast Europe service region is. So, as of last week, there were 34 root servers here in this region, by one definition, representing 7 of the root server labels. There are 7 root servers today in Belgrade, and there is 1 root server in Podgorica in Montenegro. There are 6 root servers in Sofia. There are 3 root servers today in Zagreb. There are 8 root servers in Bucharest and 1 root server in Chisinau in Moldova. The one on the right that you see there is in Odessa. I was told Western Turkey might be part of this region, at least up to Istanbul. So in Istanbul, there are 4 root servers today. And finally, for our friends down in the south, in Greece, enjoying their warm weather, there are 4 root servers today in Athens. So it's very important to understand that after M went to wide, John Postel died. The plan was always to take J, which is with VeriSign, and L, which is with ICANN, actually give them to other new root server operators as they showed up and were ready and able to run a root server. But when John died in 1998, we were left with no process to add new root server operators or replace existing ones. We hope, for the first time in 21 years, we have a path forward. This Root Server System Advisory Committee has now published a new document, RSAC 037, a proposed governance model for the DNS root server system. It's a formal mechanism by which to govern root servers, to fund them, to manage them, and to measure them. I wanted to talk a little bit about the designation and removal function, about how to add or replace root server operators. This function establishes when there is a need for a root server operator, and only when there is a need to obtain an application from organizations who are willing to be designated as root server operators. Root server candidates are evaluated by the performance measurement and monitoring function, and they recommend the designation of a new root server operator from the pool of candidates based on those evaluations. The function can also handle removal cases where a root server operator should no longer operate the root server. It participates in accountability efforts by evaluating existing operators for compliance. So today, where are we? Well, the proposed governance model is now under consideration by the ICANN board. The board has commissioned the ICANN org to develop a concept paper as part of its consideration of this proposal. The paper will be published, and the public comment period will open shortly after the next ICANN meeting this June in Marrakesh. So I want to talk for just a quick minute about the distribution of the root zone. So in the model that we've used for 34 years, the root zone maintainer, which is a function, is responsible for distributing the root zone. On the left, TLDs make changes. New TLDs come, TLDs go, TLD make changes to their records. Those changes are communicated to the IANA function, and the IANA function passes the root zone file to the root zone maintainer. The root zone maintainer today is VeriSign, but it's important to note that that can be anyone. It's a contracted function. And today it's VeriSign, tomorrow it could be CZNIC or somebody else. But right now it's VeriSign, and as the root zone maintainer, they have the final edit onto the root zone. And when that edit is complete, each day, through a highly redundant and system, very reliable that they've built, they distribute the root zone to all of the root server operators, who then distribute the root zone to each of their instances. It turns out that really significant recursive resolver operators over the last 20 years don't participate in that. They actually run a copy of the root zone locally. Steve Crocker, recently celebrated as the author of RFC1, which had its 50th anniversary just a week or so ago, named this concept hyperlocal, running a root server local to the recursive resolver that you're operating. Hyperlocal is meant to complement, and certainly not replace, the root server system. The IETF took a look at this, saw that hyperlocal was very much out in the wild, and decided it would be a really good idea to describe hyperlocal so that people who want to can run it well and run it safely. The current internet draft is RFC 7706 biz, which was revised just last month. And if you read it, it actually gives some really good examples on how to set up modern resolvers to use hyperlocal. Hyperlocal has some benefits. It's local. It's sometimes on the same machine as a recursive resolver, which means it's fast. The round trip time is local, very, very quick. Importantly, it's local, so routes to the root servers cannot be hijacked. You cannot be misrouted because you're never leaving your own lane. And because it's local, queries users make to the root servers cannot be snooped on by any external third parties. At the same time, hyperlocal does have some drawbacks, and the most important drawback is fragility. If you're setting up hyperlocal, you have to pull down the root zone from somewhere, you have to populate, you have to prime the cache, and you have to set up a fallback mechanism in case any of that fails, so that root service is uninterrupted for your users, and what's your fallback mechanism, of course, is the root server system. And of course, with all those extra steps, with the fallback, that of course is fragility in the software ecosystem. So, I hope you enjoyed a bit of the history. This root server system that we look at and that we use is strong, it's robust, highly redundant, and has worked beautifully for 34 years now. The internet, however, continues to evolve. The pace of evolution will never slow, and as it evolves, perhaps so too will the system of root service. And it is ICANN's hope, certainly, that the implementation of a new governance model is a valuable and significant contribution to the evolution of the root server system. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Questions, please? Yeah.
Hi, Kemal Chankar from question about DNSSEC towards the IPv6. IPv6 DNSSEC requests, the lack of fragmentation, what's being done to address the problem, as part of which responses are too big, which makes them being dropped on the routers.
Yeah, the IETF continues to work on this, the DNS Ops working group, and as solutions are published, we'll see what gets implemented and how that works, but it's a very good question.
Other questions? So I have a very simple question.
Yeah.
You showed some of the stats here from the region here.
Yeah.
And what was kind of clear was there are no roots in Bosnia here, right?
No, there are no root servers here in Bosnia.
Yes, yes, and you touched on a little bit while you were talking why it would be good to have a root server nearby. So what would be the process of how easy or how difficult would it be for an operator, or maybe the exchange point that we're going to have a session about coming up soon, getting something like an L root, for example?
So I work for ICANN, and ICANN operates L root, so I can easily answer your wonderful question. Thank you. Any operator can request an L root instance. You can simply talk to me or talk to anyone you know at ICANN, and we can forward your request to the engineering organization that runs L root, and they can send out an L single instance to your network. And this is very good. If here in Bosnia or in any of your localities where you don't have root service locally, you should please get some. Internet exchanges are a different story. At L root, we do not issue L root instances to IXs themselves, primarily due to how IXs were traditionally funded organizationally and founded organizationally. However, if you run an IX and you think you should have a root server there, which you probably should, it's a very good idea. Many of the other root server operators would be very glad to work with you to put a root server instance inside the exchange point.
Yeah, great, David.
Well,
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention. Jan
Who are
George.
you? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Jan.
Morning, Jan.
I just wanted to mention that they're building the BHNIX, the first IXP in the country, so maybe it would be a good idea to put a root server there. Now, if you don't give iAccess root servers, then that's too bad, but maybe they should think about something else.
The BHNIC absolutely should have a root server, and it should have an NTP server, plus many other things.
Yeah.
And strongly encourage the organizers of BHNIC to approach some of the other root server operators and get a root server instance there.
Yeah, thank you.
So to also, Fergus, where you go, the NCC, as you heard, right, runs the K-root server. Again, find any of the NCC staff. They can tell you a little bit more about how to get K-root as well. Maybe you end up with 2 letter root servers here in the country. And also talking about the exchange points really quickly, there's somebody, she's not in the room here, but from Packet Clearinghouse, PCH, that actually have deployment solutions for exchanges that carry copies of the root servers as well. So yeah, there.
Yeah, and more than one root server is good, because root server labels have different traffic patterns. Different root server labels are set up in different networks and different infrastructures and different cloud providers throughout the world. And you'll find that some root servers actually have, are topologically closer to your users than others.
Yeah.
Fergus?
Fergus?
Hi, Fergus Mackay, Flex Optics, but speaking as myself. Both VeriSign and NetNod would be happy to help with either ISPs or other IXs, and I'm happy to make introductions. The VeriSign process is really simple. It's pretty much fill in a form, they send you a form, you fill it in, they ship you a box. I've done the NetNod process for other IXs, but it was like a completely black box. It just happened. So I don't know if so. And again, PCH has a really interesting server product that has lots of country zones as well as just the copy of the root, so definitely talk to them. And Elena she's here.
She's around.
And if not, come and, if you don't know who she is, talk to me and I'll introduce you.
You know, and that brings up an interesting point, because when you offer your network and when you offer your resources to be a root server instance, you're not just helping your users, you're actually helping the whole internet. Because the whole reason this root server system that I've described works is because it's so highly redundant, because there are so many instances throughout the world. And if a node next to you or nodes near you go down for any reason, when you're there running a node in your strong network, it helps everybody else who needs root service.
Yeah. So I have a follow-up, well, not a follow-up question, but another question, but you know, very short answer would be great. Because you touched on something very quickly when you're talking, and I think it's worth mentioning it as well. You mentioned DNS over TLS, and you mentioned there's some of the new operators now, Quad 9, 1.1.1. Can you elaborate a little bit about that in a minute or two about what that is and what's happening there?
So most people on the internet, even the end users who don't know a whole lot about the internet, know you can get DNS service by pointing your box at 8.8.8.8. This is a public DNS service run by Google for a very long time. But today, there are quite a lot of public DNS operators. And they said, hey, you know, that's actually a pretty good concept. So Cloudflare runs 1.1.1.1. The Global Cyber Alliance and IBM run 9.9.9.9. Our friends in Taiwan at TWNIC run 127.127.127.127. And these are large, public, recursive DNS services that are highly anycasted, highly distributed around the world. And their goal is to provide you with fast, redundant, recursive service so that your queries are faster and more reliable.